It's my great privilege to introduce Mr. Paul Mather, our keynote speaker. Paul's spent 35 years at Oregon DOT. He started as a summer trainee. Please welcome Paul Mather.
Well, welcome to Oregon. Glad to have you here. This is a great conference and a great opportunity for you to share what you know about pavements and preservation techniques, and a chance for you to learn a lot. I tell you, the industry and those of us leading transportation depend on you guys in just keeping the technology coming and the innovations coming, and just those techniques to stretch our dollars and keep our programs moving forward. And conferences like this are key for that. So I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to come here and spend several days kind of diving into some things. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about a couple of things today here to start. I know your agenda is full of different pavement techniques and innovations and focused on quality. I'm going to take a little different kind of angle here to start with and talk about a couple of things. First, I'm going to talk about, so how do we tell our story? It's pretty easy to get in a group like this and kind of get pretty deep into different pavement issues. But for the average person, pavement's black, and that's about all they know or really care to know about pavements. So how do we tell our story? And a lot of what I've been doing the last several years, and most recently the last legislative session, is telling our story to legislators here in Oregon, so we could come up with a funding package to help us in transportation, not just from congestion standpoint, from multimodal, but also to help just preserve the system that we have. So I want to talk a little bit about some thoughts I have about how we can tell our story better or more than what we do. I know you're going to spend a lot of time on quality. I'm going to share a couple of thoughts on quality, maybe that aren't on your agenda, but are things I know we're all talking about in our industry about things that affect quality. And they're not probably things that first come to your mind, but I know we're all talking about a couple of these things. So just share a few thoughts. So when we tell our story about pavements, I think we, at least for me, go back to freshman year in college, pull out that chart we got in our pavements class, and really tell the story that where we need to live is in the bottom part of that graph, where things are cheap. Whether we're doing chip seals, crack seals, single layer pavement, that's where we can be really efficient. And if we're doing our job well and we're living down there on the graph, no one cares about pavements. It's not an issue. If we're living on the upper part of that graph, obviously we're living in a lot of potholes, a lot of costs, and then people are talking about what we're doing. But typically this is how we tell our story with pavements. And it's hard, at least in my experience, in talking with legislators in public, it's hard for them really kind of wrap their brain even around this. For us, this makes perfect sense. But for a lot of others, they struggle with that. So as we went into the last legislative session for us, so turn the clock back about a year ago, we were thinking, how do we tell the story a little different? How can we tell it in terms that people are going to be able to relate to? And people can relate to their pocketbooks, people can relate to their jobs. So how can we do it from an economic standpoint was one of the angles that we took. And we compiled a report that we called Rough Roads Ahead 2, and we cited it several times as we went through the conversations with legislatures about how not only pavements, but the whole transportation system has an economic effect on our economy and on jobs. But we also talked broader than, say, just pavements. So that's my other point that I want to talk about, is when you talk about pavements, you can't just talk about pavements. You got to talk about bridges. You got to talk about other parts of transportation, so people see how it fits. It kind of all fits together. In our report, we started with different scenarios that we did analysis on, and started with the base case there, and one is current funding, and kind of showed how pavements and bridges and everything kind of mixed together. And then as you stack on additional revenue, you kind of beef up each component there in each of those different scenarios. To nobody's surprise, you spend more money on pavements, you see your bridge repair, bridge conditions improve, your weight restrictions on your bridges go down, pavement conditions obviously go up. But in the upper part of that chart there, you can see some of the numbers from a job standpoint. That the jobs forfeited, or the jobs you lose, this is just in the state of Oregon, as you disinvest in the system, it has a consequence on jobs, has a consequence on your gross national product and $1 billion there for the state. So it really kind of opened some conversations for us as we were talking with lawmakers who understand it takes jobs to generate revenue. It takes that for them to do other things that they want to do in public policy and the taxes that are generated through jobs. And really helped us with that. So here's a graph that just illustrates specifically that point. When we did our analysis, it was just on the state system. We made some assumptions as you spread that over to the local system of what that would mean. But in any case, there's a direct relationship to the condition of your transportation system and to the jobs and the vitality of your economy throughout the state. We presented for them kind of different scenarios of different funding and what that would do specifically for pavements. We did the same thing for bridges, for culverts, for other parts of our system for them to see what that impact would be. Fortunately, we got what's called House Bill 2017 that passed, and we saw and are seeing some very big increases, not only in transportation, but in what we call the fix-it side or the maintenance side of what we do, and investments in pavements and bridges in a sustainable way that we haven't seen for a long time. Some of our past funding packages going back almost a couple decades, this is by far bigger than anything we've seen, and it gives us not just bonded revenue, but sustainable revenue to start addressing some of our long-term pavement and bridge needs. So again, my point here is just when you talk about pavements and you kind of tell our story, talk more than just about pavements, give them a bigger context than just pavements and transportation, and then relate to something like jobs or your pocketbook when you talk about why pavements are important and the importance it is to the vitality of your jurisdiction, state or city or county, wherever you're working. Last thing I want to do is just touch on quality. I know you're going to spend a lot of time talking about that today. In a lot of different aspects, but I'm going to share with you a couple of things maybe from my standpoint of things that are affecting our quality that maybe not traditionally we think about in quality. The first is our workforce and the challenges that we're having. I know here in Oregon and at ODOT, the ability to attract and retain those quality employees that we need not only in the department but on the contractor side, whether you're talking about inspectors, whether you're talking about truck drivers. That workforce and the talent and the skill level of that workforce has a direct bearing on the quality product that turns out. So it's not just about temperature, it's not just about compaction, it's about the skill set and quality of individual that we have on our jobs too. So it's something I'm sure we're all wrestling with to some extent, probably some more than others, and but it's something I guess I would encourage you to talk about as you have some time over dinner or in the hallways to maybe share some things about how we can improve this. In my standpoint, obviously there's some things we can do in the short term to help with wages, benefit packages, and so forth, but there's also a long-term component of how do we get people interested in this industry to begin with, both on the construction contractor side as well as the inspection or the state side. How do we bring students, maybe clear back into high school, interested in this, in the work that we do and why it's so important. The last thing I want to touch on is work zones. We all know if we've been out in the work zones over the last few years, just the dangers and the changing nature of our work zones. Not only impaired drivers, which we've had for a while, but now we're also adding distracted drivers in a way that is really presenting new dangers in our work zones at new kind of unprecedented levels. Here in Oregon, we've had a flagger that was killed this summer, another one that was severely injured, and countless close calls with them. We've been working with our industry partners for the last several years to try to look at our work zones and our approach to our work, that we not only get the quality of product that we need out there, but we can do it in a way that's the safest as we can. So as we think about what it would be or what it's like when we have those close calls or serious injuries and the effect that has not only on production of that job but the quality of that job, there's certainly a relationship to the dangers that we see out there in our work zones and the product that we produce. again, I'd ask you as you spend time together over the next couple days, look for opportunities to share things that you're doing locally to help this issue. How do we get drivers' attention? How do we get drivers to slow down? What are the tricks and techniques each of us are using to make advances in this area? Because it's an area that seems to be growing in the wrong direction. And trying to get a handle on this and bring drivers to really appreciate and respect our work zones has been a challenge. So finally, just enjoy your time here. Oregon is a special place for all of us that live here, that work here. We really enjoy here, and we hope that as you spend your time here, you get to enjoy the state a little bit in your time here. But most importantly, spend time with each other and learn from each other, share with each other, and take advantage of the time that you have here. So thank you again for coming and spending 3 or 4 days with us and learning, and appreciate you being here. Thank you.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.